My name is Mindy Schroeder, and I'm the current president of the San Diego chapter. I came into this role after many years of having to deal with a personal situation with Huntington's, which was my dad being diagnosed. And at the time that my dad was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, I had never even heard of it. I get that it's a genetic disease, and I understand that most people know that Huntington's is in their family, but my dad was estranged from his mom, and his dad died when he was really young, so he didn't know his medical history. And my dad had been sick for a while. He'd been seeing a neurologist for 7 years, and we knew that he had a movement disorder, but we just didn't know what it was. And then one day he woke up and he told my mom that he couldn't get out of bed because he couldn't move his legs. And when she called me and she told me that, I kind of got fed up and said, we got to get my dad diagnosed. So I got on the phone, I made some calls. We got him referred out to one of the best neurologists in San Diego. And about 3 weeks later, he was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. So what happened after that was about 2 years of me going through a downward spiral of fear and denial and anxiety and pain. And I ended up getting tested for Huntington's and found out that I was gene negative. And what I thought when I got my result was, I'm so lucky that I get to be healthy, which means that I get to have a voice to advocate. And I moved home and started caring for my dad, along with other family members. And a couple of years after he passed away is when I really started to get involved with HDSA. So it started off with me just volunteering at different events. And eventually I became more and more involved and joined the board. And now I am the president of Huntington's Disease Society in San Diego, with a real goal of trying to improve the lives of other families with Huntington's. I know what it was like for me to feel isolated and alone and fearful, to not understand that there was a whole community out there because I never met anybody else who had Huntington's disease. And one of the things that has really come to light for me in getting involved is how many people I actually do know that are connected to Huntington's disease. And in the end, it's really been a way for me to build a community, to build support, to build knowledge, to make a difference and do something that makes me feel like I have a say in a disease that otherwise I have no control over. Huntington's disease is a rare disease, and a rare disease is something that will often get ignored, overlooked, won't be understood. And I think one of the biggest issues with Huntington's is that when it starts, it doesn't start as an obvious disease. It starts as an emotional issue, a psychological issue. And people don't understand that there are changes that are happening in a person's brain that has Huntington's disease that you can't see or understand or wrap your own brain around because you're not experiencing it. And to see a person with Huntington's disease going through those changes and not understand them it's terrible for the person with Huntington's disease. So getting involved and advocating and talking about it and educating your friends and your family and the people on your social media about what this disease is and what it does to people will create an environment of compassion and understanding. And I think when people understand and bring compassion to the table, it just improves the lives of people who are, going through this experience. And the other thing about talking about it is there's this phenomenon in Huntington's families where we all stick our heads in the hole because nobody wants to deal with something so horrific. And we want to pretend like it's not happening to us. We don't want to scare the person that may be symptomatic or bring up something that causes somebody else pain. There's so many reasons to just shut up and hide and pretend like things aren't happening and go into a place of denial. But the more you recess into denial, the more anxiety you feel and the more fear you feel and the more isolated you feel. And this is a disease that you need support for. And the opposite of what we want to do is hide from it. We want to get out there and talk about it and understand it and make it less scary and make it less dark and lonely. I think when I think about Huntington's disease, one of the things I think is loneliness. Whether you're the person that has the disease and are going through the changes, or you're the person that loves the person with the disease and watching them go through the changes. It's just a really isolating experience. And what I find is the more I talk about this disease, the more I explain it to people, the more I help people understand what happened to my dad and what my family is going through, the more I get support and love. And people who say, gosh, Mindy, I really didn't know that that's what was happening to you. And I'd really love to be able to be there to support you. And creating that sense of community and support has also given me the confidence to have hope again. So nowadays I can look and say, there are all these people out here that just want to make my life better, that want to help my family, that want to love us. And when I didn't talk about Huntington's disease, I felt like if I opened up my mouth and said anything, that people would run the other direction for fear of having to be involved with somebody who was going through such an emotional crisis. So when I think about specifically the Let's Talk About Huntington's Disease campaign, I think about how can I use this to open up the conversation of a disease that's not well understood, and that we need to be talking about in order to create a sense of hope and community and connection. First of all, my advice is don't ignore this disease. The longer that you don't talk about Huntington's, the harder it's going to be on you when you finally do. I think the important thing in families is that we all love each other and we want to be there for each other. And when we try to ignore it or we try to pretend it's not happening, we're not actually helping each other. We're making it worse for each other. So I know it's a hard thing to hit it head on, but I think in the end, when my family finally sat down and had a conversation about what was going on, there was this huge sense of relief. And the other advice I'd have is, I used to say, I don't want to give Huntington's disease one more minute of my time. And that's one of the reasons why I never got involved with HDSA. I just felt overwhelmed. But when I finally did get involved in this community, I ended up making really strong connections and friendships. And my life became better because I knew other people that were going through what I was going through and could understand it. And it ended up not being that I was giving more time to the disease, but I was giving more time to me and taking care of my own emotional needs by reaching out. And whether that's like volunteering for an event or going to a support group or getting online and reading about resources or watching some of the videos that are out there from experts that HDSA puts out, buying a heart for Huntington and putting your person's name on it, just anything that acknowledges that you're going through this and makes you feel connected, I would encourage a person to do. And do it on your terms. Don't do it on what you think you ought to be doing. Do it based on what you can bring to the table and what makes sense to you.